we did not call the bills because Senator Radogno told me after we negotiated all day over some more items that if we were to call the bills, that there would be very little, if any, Republican support other than herself. And this was always designed to be a bipartisan effort. Many of these tough bills, as you could see from the ones that we've already voted on, require support from both parties. So that's as a result, there's no sense in calling the bills and having them be defeated, especially since it's my intention to hopefully continue to pass this grand bargain. It's essential to the governor's budget. The governor himself even said grand bargain in his budget documents. I think he said that his budget was short about $4.5 billion. We later found out it was short about $6.5 billion. So I assume that the next move is the governor's to tell us why these Republican senators were voting no on bills that he supported. Yesterday we had a pension bill that I can tell you we took language directly from his staff. I had personally negotiated that pension bill with him earlier, and he insisted that I go out and call the bill. And I told him it's complicated passing bills. And he's proved that because his own party didn't support the bill that he wanted me to call. So we are open for business here. We have half these, I think half the bills have passed. We are ready to, whenever we have the support of enough senators who are Republican. We did a very good job in getting support from a good number of the Democrats willing to vote on these tough issues. And I'm looking forward to doing this. Nothing's gotten any better. It's March. We do not have authority to spend money for higher education. That ended January 1st, remember? We do not have authority for some human services from government operations. The figure that Senator Radogno had used of $11 million a day, if that was accurate, that's still happening. So, and the effort to raise taxes starting January 1st become more difficult the further you get into the year. I would suggest that what you should do is ask the Senate Republicans individually what the governor did. I haven't talked to the governor. I've talked to Republican senators who said they went and saw the governor today, so you should ask them what he told them.
So, President, what are the next steps then? Is this back to 4 leader meetings where the governor is involved in negotiations again? Is that how we're moving forward?
Well, that didn't work before. That's why we started this. Again, my attitude is I was ready to call these bills today. I had sufficient number of votes from the Democratic caucus to pass them all, assuming we had a similar percentage of votes from the Republicans. So it's not my move. I think it's really assuming that what happened here is that the governor pulled votes off. We should find out why the governor did that. Apparently he wants to change the items that were negotiated, but that's what has failed to do for 2 years. This was a good exercise because you can go look at the bills. There's things there that Democrats don't want to vote for. Unions are against it. Trial lawyers are against it. But we still were willing to put votes on the board. The things that the governor asked for, he even got term limits for leaders. He's got workers' comp changes. He's got bills dealing with his property tax freeze, pension reform. He's got that. And a negotiated revenue bill with Senator Radogno supports every one of those today. So he's the leader of his party. He's the one that put $50 million into his fund as a down payment. You'll have to ask him what the next step is. I'm willing to do anything, go to meetings, but the main thing is those bills are out there. They're ready to be called. We need Republican support.
He's tweeted a photo of what he wants to see out of this grand bargain. One of the things is a permanent property tax freeze. Is that a non-starter?
Yeah. We negotiated a 5-year property tax freeze, a 2-year permanent and a 3-year by referendum. Does that sound like a compromise? Yes. That's how you pass legislation, not by going back to what he did 2 years ago, the day he got inaugurated, and giving us his turnaround agenda. The status quo is that we're spending $7 or $8 billion more than we have. That's the status quo. It's not like we're not overspending. We are overspending right now because we have court orders, we have continuing appropriations. And he's the one that signed the appropriation for education when all of his Republicans had voted no. So he doesn't want to shut down the schools, doesn't want to shut down the state government, doesn't want to compromise. And as a result, we're, as I said in an earlier speech, we owe $12 billion. On election day, 2 years from now, we'll owe $24 billion. In this package, we have $1 billion, $100 million. That's in the package implicitly because we raised revenues a certain amount so that we can pay off $7 billion worth of borrowing. That's one of those standalone bills, a $7 billion borrowing so we can pay off our bills. That costs $1.1 billion in a year. And you have 7 years to pay them off. If we don't pass something this year, we probably won't pass something in the fiscal, in the election year, then we will owe $24 billion. If we're 2 years behind in paying our bills right now, we would be 4 years behind, presumably. So this has got to end, and that's what we've been saying. Senator Verdonio and I have worked together. I respect her to this day. She's the one that's stood firm. It was her idea initially to do this, to show that we can come up with a compromise. The compromise is there. The governor's got to realize that this is as good as it's going to get. Can we make some minor changes? Of course we can. We've been doing that for a month with Senate Republicans. But he's got to grow up and get this solved. He's the governor.
Do you think the governor actually wants a resolution to the budget?
I don't know. I haven't talked to him. I do. I think we got elected to balance the budget. That's what our number one goal is. He wanted to attach reforms to that obvious responsibility of passing a budget. We have attached the reforms. He says they're not enough. Okay, what's your alternative? 2 more years, no money, a junk bond status might come just as a result of us not calling this bill today. So I don't know what else to say to him. I mean, he's got to figure this out. I think he's got maybe some bad advisors. Maybe that's part of the problem.
It's been said from the beginning that Republican rank and file members, are sick of having no budget too, But if that's true, then how could it be that, the governor having meetings with people just on one day on, a change of opinion,
Yeah.
can sway them?
Well, your question should be directed to those Republican senators, and I would urge you to do so. I mean, you got roll calls you can look at. There's only 22 of them. I have a lot more people to talk to. So you can talk to those 22 and ask them what they were thinking.
I talked to a couple, and they said they're just trying to drive a harder bargain.
Yeah, okay.
But does there come a point where
Well, you know what? I believe that they understand that at this point in time, it's hard to say Illinois is not competitive because of our workers' comp laws, and we're losing jobs and all that because of our workers' comp laws, when in fact, the reason why we might be hurting is because we don't have a budget, because we've been downgraded. The image of the state as the one of the worst run in the state, is the only one that doesn't have a budget, that's what's hurting the jobs climate and the business climate. So I think that he's got to figure that out. I think maybe that many of the Senate Republicans have, and I think that it's not the Senate Republicans who want to drive a hard bargain. I think it's the governor told them that that's what he wants.
What changed from a few weeks ago when he was heaping praise on the Senate grand bargain, cut an ad claiming ownership of the grand bargain, and then today is working against him?
Well, he's willing to compromise as long as he gets 100% of what he wants, apparently. So that's not how it works. He's never been a governor before and never been in government. And people have to press buttons. People have to vote. Believe me, it's hard for me to go around and work roll calls. You see me doing it. I got as many votes as I can on all these packages, with some of my members really upset that I even are calling these bills. That's what it is. That's what you do. And he apparently doesn't have people around him that he's listening to that understand how that works. So it now has got to the point where the lack of a budget itself is what's really the problem that has to be solved. And he should be lucky he's getting any of these reforms, because what we really need to do is get a budget, and that includes some revenue. And believe me, that when you structure revenue, you implicitly have to figure out, well, do we have enough money to pay for our bills? And so, even though we're not doing the budget for next year now, we're raising revenue in anticipation of that budget. And we would be saving billions of dollars by doing this grand bargain from what we're actually spending. So we're not cutting anything by not passing a bill. And that's a fundamental thing that he has to understand. We are obligating ourselves to expenses way in excess of the revenues we have in, and that's costing us more revenue to pay off the borrowing we inevitably would have to do to pay those bills. There's no such thing as standing pat here. We're spending $7 or $8 billion more than we have coming in. And the grand bargain actually ends up in us spending less than that, because we're not incurring further debt that has to be paid off.
Beyond
Yes,
the
ma'am.
property tax freeze that he wants to be permanent, are you aware of any of his other so-called non-negotiables, and can the Senate do anything?
No, see, I never talked to him. I don't negotiate. I haven't negotiated with him. I've been negotiating with Senator Radonio. And then we get these new requests all the time that presumably are coming from the governor. And then finally, we have no votes except for Radonio's.
And if he's not willing to make that next move that you mentioned, do you know what the Senate's next step will be?
Well, I have a package of bills out there, some of which have passed. The rest can be called whenever I'm told by the Republicans that they're ready to vote for it.
The governor has repeatedly said that his demands are, it's about short-term pain now for long-term
Yeah.
gain. What do you make of that?
Maybe the first month or 6 months of his administration, he could say short-term pain. Now it's been 2 years of pain and $12 billion in debt and $24 billion if we don't do anything. And the actual potential destruction of the state's economy has already started to occur because we don't have a budget. So that's what I would say to him. And so here we are, giving you an opportunity to claim, of course, that you have very substantive reforms, substantive enough that the trial lawyers and the unions are certainly against it. What else does he want? What other proof does he want? They're doing robocalls telling people to vote against the bills, the unions. So what does he want us to do? I mean, this is a very fair compromise. The very modest taxes, unfortunately, it's sorry we have to do any taxes, but because of the delay for 2 years, they had to be higher than they otherwise would have been. So it all argues for the fact that we should get this done as soon as possible, and I'm still willing to do that.
So did the governor hang his own Republican leader out to dry here then? You said that she came to you, wanted to work this out in the Senate?
Senator Radonio has not been left out to dry. She's the one that's standing tall. She's the one that's willing to compromise. She's been compromised, and she's willing to vote for all these bills. The governor is the governor of the state, and the state is in big trouble, and he's in charge.
Speaking of that union opposition, if Republicans get back on board, how sure are you of your own caucus that you're gonna have the votes on?
Well, I've been spending a lot of time working with my caucus. We've had some votes that are contested. You saw how many votes I was able to get. There's different parts of the state. There's different backgrounds. There's different people have different terms of office. All that comes into play. I know how to pass bills. I've passed more bills than I sponsored more bills than any other legislator, to my knowledge, in the history of the state. So I know how to work a bill and pass a bill. And we were ready to pass all the bills if we had our Republican partners on board. Hey, guys, I'm tired. One more question.
change throughout today, or did you know this was gonna happen by the
No,
end of the day?
no, when we were working this morning on some modifications to this request for, what was then a request for a 5-year property tax freeze, which is untenable for poor school districts. So we were negotiating that, and we came up with a compromise. So that stopped, and she said that there's no votes except for hers.